Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Today we're reading from Canto 7, Chapter 9, verse 28. Evam janam nipatitam pravahi kupe kam abhikaman anuya prapatam prasangat. Kritvatma satsurarshina bhagavan grihita soham katam nu vrishije tava britya sevam. Evam, thus, janam, people in general, nipatitam, fallen, prabhav, of material existence, ahi kupe, in a blind well full of snakes, kama abhikamam, desiring the sense objects, anu, following, yaha, the person who, prapatam, falling down in this condition, prasangat, because of bad association or increased association with material desires. Kritva atmasat, causing me to acquire spiritual qualities like himself, Sri Narada. Surarishina, by the great saintly person Narada. Bhagavan, O my Lord. Grihita, accepted. Saha, that person. Aham, I. Katam, how. Nu, indeed. Vishijye, can give up. Tava, your. Britya sevam, the service of your pure devotee. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. My dear Lord, O Supreme Personality of Godhead, because of my association with material desires, one after another, I was gradually falling into a blind well full of snakes, following the general populace. But your servant Narada Muni kindly accepted me as his disciple and instructed me how to achieve this transcendental position. Therefore, my first duty is to serve him. How could I leave his service? Purport. As will be seen in later chapters, even though Prahlad Maharaj was directly offered all the benedictions he might have desired, he refused to accept such offerings from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. On the contrary, he asked the Lord to engage him in the service of his servant Narada Muni. This is the symptom of a pure devotee. One should serve the spiritual master first. It is not that one should bypass the spiritual master and desire to serve the Supreme Lord. This is not the principle for a Vaishnava. Narottam Das Thakur says, Tandira charana sevi bhakta sanivas, janame jamani hoy e abhilash. One should not be anxious to offer direct service to the Lord. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu advised that one become a servant of the servant of the servant of the Lord. Gopi Bhartur Padakamalayur Das Das Anudas. This is the process for approaching the Supreme Lord. The first service should be rendered to the spiritual master so that by his mercy one can approach the Supreme Personality of Godhead to render service. While teaching Rupa Goswami, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, Guru Krishna Prasade Pai Bhakti Lata Bij. one can achieve the seat of devotional service by the mercy of the Guru, the spiritual master, and then by the mercy of Krishna. This is the secret of success. First, one should try to please the spiritual master, and then one should attempt to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur also says, Yasya prasadat bhagavat prasado. One should not attempt to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead by concoction. One must first be prepared to serve the spiritual master, and when one is qualified, he is automatically offered the platform of direct service to the Lord. Therefore, Prahlad Maharaj proposed that he engage in the service of Narada Muni. He never proposed that he engage directly in the service of the Lord. This is the right conclusion. Therefore he said, Soham katham nu vishrijye tava britya sevam. How can I give up the service of my spiritual master, who has favored me in such a way that I am now able to see you face to face? Prahlad Maharaj prayed to the Lord that he might continue to engage in the service of his spiritual master, Narada Muni. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti-Vedanta Swamini Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschati Desatarne Om Ajnana Timurandasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chakshurunmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Today we're continuing Srila Prabhupada's arrival in America. We heard yesterday that on September 10th, Srila Prabhupada wrote in his Jaladuta diary that he was beginning to feel better. This was a little diary that was given to him on the steamship itself. Prabhupada started to keep notes in that diary. So September 10th, he was remembering Vrindavan and his beloved lords in Vrindavan, and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his message, and most of all his spiritual master who had sent him here to America. September 10th, then September 13th, Srila Prabhupada wrote a very intimate poem. It's in the form of a poem in Bengali script, handwritten, in that diary. And it was called Krishna Etete, only to you, Krishna, because this was a very intimate appeal to Krishna. Now we have here a translation. First I want to apologize. Yesterday when we were reading Markine Bhagavad Dharma, I accidentally started to read the first few translations from this particular thing, so I mixed it up. And then, but I still kept giving the same purports, so because I'm a fool, so today we'll get it right. We'll try to get it right. So in this particular translation that's in the BBT publication, Shower of Divine Compassion, it was translated by our godbrother named Dasarath Sutta. But yesterday, by chance, 5 times, 1 hour each time, I listened to the translation of His Holiness Bhakti Prem Swami, disciple of Bhakti Charu Swami, who is Bengali, who understands Prabhupada's message here possibly a little better than an American-born disciple of Prabhupada who was learning Bengali at the time. So his rendition of the translation is very different from what you find in this book. And his rendition is so intimate and explains so deeply Prabhupada's mood that I'm going to take that translation when we try to understand Prabhupada's feelings towards Lord Krishna. For instance, the very first line, Krishna tava punya habe bai. According to Bhakti Prem Swami, and from now on everything I say will be as he translated it, Prabhupada is speaking directly to Krishna. He's saying, brother, if you do this auspicious work for me, then Radharani will be very pleased with you. Now, why is Prabhupada telling Krishna to do something for him so that Radharani will be pleased with Krishna? He's independent. He enjoys everything within himself. But Hladini Shakti, Srimati Radharani, when he wants to enjoy with others, she is the object of his enjoyment. So Prabhupada he's saying to Krishna that if you do this for me, I know Radharani is going to be very pleased with you, so you should do this. Now, why is that? Next sloka, he said, my spiritual master, Sri Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he is very dear to Srimati Radharani, and he has given me an order. So if you help me fulfill this order, because I'm completely unqualified to fulfill it, if you help me, because my spiritual master is so dear to Radharani, Radharani will be pleased, and therefore she'll be pleased with you. So you have to help me. So what was that order? We know that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said that in Nagaradi Gram, his name would be heard. Now even Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to please Krishna, because he wanted Krishna and Ram's name to be spread all over the world. But Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, why only Nagaradi? Why only in the towns and the villages? Krishna's name should be spread in the nadas, the nadis, the oceans, everywhere, wherever any living entities are. We have to spread the holy name. And he started this by taking the holy name out of Bharatvarsha and distributing it to all the fallen people who are entangled in Maya's illusion. He was so merciful. And then Prabhupada gives this sloka, spoken by Prahlad Maharaj. This is the perfect meditation of a disciple and his spiritual master. Because this is after Hiranyakashipu was killed, and Nrsingadev, he offers to Prahlad Maharaj, any benediction you want from me, I want to give you. Prahlad Maharaj said, there's nothing I need. I'm perfectly happy. But when I see other people suffering so much in the snare of Maya, then I feel so sorry for them and I want to help them. He explains that I was falling into a deep dark well, and in the bottom of that well were venomous snakes. And my spiritual master, he lifted me up. My spiritual master is Narada Muni. So my only prayer is that I can help Narada Muni in his mission to please you. So Prahlad Maharaj, with this meditation, which is being described by Prabhupada in the purport here to this sloka, that it also in the Bhagavad-Gita, Krishna explains it, Vyasakatmika buddhi, that we should have single-purpose intelligence. And what is that? Where should that intelligence go but to carry out the instruction of the spiritual master? Otherwise, we're bahusaka, everywhere, here, there, I want to do this for Krishna, that for Krishna. No. Our spiritual master has given us an instruction, and that is our fixed attention. And then Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti, in his purport, commentary on that 241, he says the very life of the disciple is to carry out the order of the spiritual master. And then in the Guruvastakam, Yasya Prasadat Bhagavat Prasado, that without the pleasing the spiritual master, one cannot make any advancement towards Krishna. Therefore, 3 times a day, we have to offer our obeisances to our spiritual master. And our whole life should be molded around carrying out his instructions. So this is the exact same mood that Prahlad had towards his spiritual master Narada Muni. Face to face, he was seeing the Lord. The Lord appeared to save him. And he only asked that he could serve his spiritual master. So now Prabhupada is speaking to Krishna, that Krishna, you help me carry out the order of my spiritual master. And his order is to spread the holy name all over the world. So I've come here, I'm completely ayogya, completely unfit, but I'm praying that you help me to carry out this order. So that was September 13th. September 17th, Prabhupada arrived at the Boston Harbor. We heard about that yesterday. 2 days later, within those 2 days, Prabhupada wrote Markine Bhagavad Dharma, where he again expresses to Krishna his complete incapacity to, I don't know why you brought me here, he says. That's the first stanza. Why have you brought me here? And then we heard that he's feeling that Krishna has brought him to America, but Prabhupada was the one who had to go through all the effort to get on that boat and come here and suffer so much. But the disciple, he thinks, the devotee, he thinks that this is all done by Krishna. I'm nothing. I'm simply trying to carry out the order of my spiritual master. So now, September 19th, Srila Prabhupada arrives at the New York Port Authority. Ports, there are different ports of entry into each city, into each state, and they each have their authority, their immigrations, and the different people that oversee who enters their city. So, because he had filled up the immigrations in Boston, he simply went through the formalities, and when he got out of the boat, and he was standing there on the dock, Prabhupada said he didn't know whether to look left or right. He didn't know where to go. So, 4 days earlier, there's Butler, Pennsylvania. Butler, Pennsylvania is a 10-hour car drive from New York City. It's in a whole other state. It's similar to, you have Delhi, and you have the next state below Delhi, that's Haryana. And then you have UP, Rajasthan. So coming from Delhi, you would go through Haryana, and Haryana is mixed. We have the HUDA, the H-U-D-A, Haryana Urban Development Authority. So although Haryana is a completely agrarian, you meet the people in the villages, they're completely simple village people. But they're trying to make it into a great urban development. So New York City and New York itself, you come out of the Port Authority at the boat, and Prabhupada didn't know where to turn. And 4 days earlier, Prabhupada had written a letter to the Agarwals. He must have written it in India, and it took so many days to get to America. Because just 4 days earlier, while Prabhupada was still on the boat, Sally Agarwal received this letter from Prabhupada saying that I'm arriving on September 19th in New York. So Sally rushes to her husband Gopal and says, "Look, Gopal, he's coming in 4 days, what should we do?" They had no arrangement for Prabhupada. So Gopal, he arranged with what's called the Traveler's Aid. It's a very organized system in America, where when foreigners come, anybody comes who's unable to take care of themselves, they send a representative and they take them to their place of destination. So Gopal Agarwal, he arranged with the Traveler's Aid that someone meet Prabhupada right there at the port. And they took him to the Port Authority bus terminal, which for us is a place of pilgrimage because hundreds of devotees were created in that place. But at that time, it was a bus terminal. Hundreds and thousands of buses coming out of there every day from all over the country. So then Traveler's Aid, he bought the ticket for Prabhupada to Butler. Actually, no, Butler is such a small place. Only 20,000 people live there. He bought a ticket to Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh, we also have a temple. That's the closest big city to our New Vrindavan. So anyone who goes to New Vrindavan, they first go to Pittsburgh. And Pittsburgh is the steel center of America. Steel mills everywhere, and coal, and all types of mining going on there. So Prabhupada sits in the bus. He had just finished 35 days on the boat. He now has 10 hours on the bus. He comes out of the bus terminal, and the bus terminal's right in the middle of Manhattan, New York City. And it heads towards, because Manhattan it's like a peninsula, there's water on both sides, the bay where Prabhupada came in, and on the other side there's the Hudson River. So the buses, they have to go through a very long tunnel called Lincoln Tunnel to get out of Manhattan. So Prabhupada goes through this tunnel. He arrives in New Jersey. And New Jersey, it's like what you experience somewhat here when you come to Faridabad. So much development everywhere. But New Jersey is just oil tanks, refineries, jet planes, and so much advertisement of the four sinful activities. So Prabhupada was just bombarded with all of this massive industrialization that he had never seen before in his whole life, because there's nothing like that here in India. Here you have one refinery, the Mathura refinery, which is the biggest refinery in all of Asia, by the way. That's why so much attention is paid. But in New Jersey, you have hundreds and hundreds of refineries. And the air and the flames, and it's just all, and electrical wires everywhere, and 4-lane highways going one way, 60 kilometers, not 60 kilometers, about 100 kilometers this way, 100 kilometers that way. It's just completely dizzying. So this is what Prabhupada saw, his first experience in America, this New Jersey. Then gradually, as you're going on the turnpike in New Jersey, it turns into countryside. You see cows, you see farms. Finally, you get into Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is just woods and mountains and forests. And you're going through the Pennsylvania Turnpike. It takes about, to get from New York to Pennsylvania, it takes about 2 hours. And then Pennsylvania to Pittsburgh, it takes about 6 to 7 hours. So finally, at midnight, Prabhupada reaches Pittsburgh. And Prabhupada had sent a picture of himself in this letter so that they could recognize, as if they wouldn't be able to recognize him at the Pittsburgh bus terminal, as if there were many sannyasi sadhus standing there at midnight in the Pittsburgh bus terminal. So Gopal Agarwal, he sees Prabhupada coming out of the bus, and he immediately offers his pranams. Several times he offers his pranams to Prabhupada. And then he puts him in his Volkswagen wagon. And Prabhupada, he had no luggage. Prabhupada brought with him the clothes he was wearing, which is his sannyas, everything that sannyasis wear, plus another set of clothes, plus his typewriter, and a bag of chira. That was enough chira to last him for a few months. And his books they're still in New York. They're coming off of the boat. So this is all the luggage Prabhupada had. And by 4 o'clock in the morning, it was an hour drive from Pittsburgh to Butler. Prabhupada couldn't see much of Pittsburgh, but he reaches Butler 4 o'clock in the morning. And they had nowhere to keep Prabhupada, so he slept there on their sofa, their couch, right in their living room. And they had 2 little children, a little 3-year-old girl named Kamala, and a little 7-month-old boy named Bridge. So the kids wake up in the morning and they see somebody lying there on their couch. They don't know who it is, what it is, nothing. They'd never seen anything like this. So Sally and Gopal, they realized we have to get a place for him to stay. He can't stay here in the house. So they rent a room 6-7 blocks away at the Butler Cubs Club. It's the YMCA. Here you have YMCA also in India. YMCA stands for Young Men's Christian Association. Now, here, the predominant 85% of the religion is Hinduism in India. At that time, in the mid-60s, especially in the state of Pennsylvania, which is a very conservative state, it was, we could say, 85% Christian. So everyone in Butler was Christian. There were there were churches everywhere, Prabhupada noted. So this Young Men's Christian Association, Prabhupada got a room there, and 7 o'clock in the morning, Prabhupada would come to their house. And he would make his breakfast of chira and hot milk. And up until Prabhupada left this planet, Prabhupada would still have chira with hot milk every morning. We would make it for him every morning. We would wash the chira once, and then pour hot milk into it and let it fluff up. That would be his main meal, and then we'd have so many fruits and sweets and other fried things. So Prabhupada, this was his staple, chira with hot milk in the morning. So he would have his chira and hot milk, Gopal would go off to work, and then Prabhupada, at about 9 o'clock, he would start cooking with his cooker, just as you see here in his house. And Sally would watch him. And Sally Agarwal, she found him to be the most pleasant guest that she ever had in her whole life. And she took him to be just like her father-in-law. And she knew from her father-in-law there were some things she couldn't do in front of him. She couldn't smoke in front of him. She couldn't eat meat in front of him. But when she had to take care of her housework, she had to take care of the children, she knew that Swamiji was always happy. He was chanting or cooking. So from the very first day, when Sally saw how Prabhupada was cooking this nice meal in his triple-decker cooker, she realized, and Prabhupada realized, that they would also like to have lunch. So every day Prabhupada would cook a feast for them. He would make dal in the bottom, then all kinds of vegetables in the center, all the steam holes, very scientific. And then on the top, a pot of rice, and then Prabhupada would spice everything. And Prabhupada didn't have a rolling pin, a belan. He would make the chapatis with his hands for everybody. So very loving relationship between the two of them. And sometimes they would take Prabhupada to the supermarket. There were no supermarkets in India at that time. We would have Kirana Dukan, that's about it in those days. But supermarkets, you walk in, you have your own wagon, and you just pull off of the shelves whatever you want, and there's a frozen area. And Prabhupada, he was so amazed when he saw the supermarket. He was just like a little child, that you could take these frozen vegetables of bindi and beans. Everything was already washed and separated and cut. All you had to do was throw it in the pot. And Prabhupada was just everything he saw. When he saw how they washed their clothes, that they had washing machines and dryers, he would go with them to the laundromat and see. And what Prabhupada did was, they had 2 floors. On the upper floor was a bathroom. And Prabhupada, just like we do here in India, he'd be on the floor washing his own clothes every day, and the floor would get all wet, and they would be, because you can't get the floors wet in America because everything's artificial. It's an artificial floor, and then all the water falls down into the next, the ceiling, and the whole ceiling gets ruined. So they had to tell Prabhupada, you can't wash your clothes anymore on the floor. The whole floor gets wet, the ceiling gets ruined. So Prabhupada, he'd find another way to wash his clothes, and then he would take his clothes to the front yard of their house and stretch it out on the grass. And that's not the way Americans live. So all the neighbors would be looking at Prabhupada's clothes on the front, on the grass. So Prabhupada just went on living the way he lived in India. And then he would go to the neighbor's backyard and sit in their chair and chant his japa. Because this is the way we live in India. So this is the way Prabhupada lived when he went to America. And anytime, for Sally it was a great experience that they had their own Swami in their living room. So she took Prabhupada to Pittsburgh, and she wanted the Pittsburgh newspapers to make an article about Prabhupada. But the Pittsburgh newspapers said, we don't care, he's off in Butler. So then she took Prabhupada to the Butler Eagle, that's the local newspaper. And they made a front page article about Prabhupada. They took a picture of him, and they told what his mission is. And at that time, Prabhupada didn't disclose to anybody what his mission was. According to Sally and Gopal, he had come to America to finance his books. That's it. They didn't know that he was planning to make a worldwide organization that would turn the whole world upside down with this Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. He didn't tell them about that. So they thought that he was going to stay with him for some time because they were his sponsor, and they would go try to sell his books in other places. So Sally, she was very intelligent, and her husband Gopal was an engineer. They had very intellectual friends. So Prabhupada suggested that every night they have an open house from 6 o'clock to 9 o'clock. Anyone who wanted to come and ask questions, they could come and speak to Prabhupada. So every night, the whole month that Prabhupada was there, people would come and he would have a kirtan, a lecture, and then question and answer time. And the people would all be smoking cigarettes, and Sally would be very upset because she knew that it's not the way you're supposed to act in front of a Swami. And Prabhupada, he would say, think nothing of it. He was never affected by the sinful activities that he saw these people committing. He wouldn't come there in the evening time. After he cooked lunch and fed them, he would go back to his room and work on his typewriter, and they would have their dinner, which would consist of meat. So one time, by chance, Prabhupada came a little early, and Sally apologized to him that, I'm so sorry, Swamiji, the house must stink of meat, we just had our dinner. And again, Prabhupada said, think nothing of it. So he made no discomfort for his hosts. He had a mission, they were very kindly helping him, and because Sally and Gopal would call Prabhupada Swamiji, so their little 3-year-old daughter, Kamala, they had sent her to Christian Sunday school, and she was learning about Jesus. So Kamala used to call Swamiji, Swami Jesus. And they couldn't understand what she was saying at first, and then they figured it out. Swami Jesus. And they were all laughing. And Prabhupada, he quoted from the Bible, because Prabhupada also went to Christian school, Scottish church. He had to go to 1 hour of Bible study every day. That was compulsory. Although they didn't become Christians, they had to learn the Bible. So he quoted from the Bible, and a child shall lead us. So he was very affectionate to the children, as we see his dealings with the children within ISKCON also. When Bridge, for the first time, was able to stand up, Prabhupada had a whole celebration. He loved the children, he loved Sally and Gopal, and they become very attached to him, very protective of Prabhupada. But Prabhupada realized, Sally also made, in all the churches in Butler, she would make different programs for him. But of course the priests and the fathers, they were very cautious. They wouldn't let Prabhupada speak too much because they were afraid that the youth might be attracted to what he was saying. And then after this newspaper article, there was a college in Butler called Slippery Rock College. And the head of the philosophy department, Dr. Larson, he invited Prabhupada to come and speak to his classes. So Dr. Larson came and picked up Prabhupada, and Dr. Larson, it took him 3 tries to finally get Prabhupada's name right, the Swami Bhakti-Vedanta. And finally, all of the philosophy classes were brought to the auditorium, and Prabhupada spoke for an hour to them. And again, they were very cautious that Prabhupada could not speak too much, because the attractiveness of the philosophy, they were afraid that the youth would be attracted. So Prabhupada had his first college engagement, he had his first speaking engagements every night at home, and he had engagements in the churches. And he saw that the people were open-minded to the philosophy. He never tried to convert anyone to Vaishnavism. He simply presented that you be Christian, but be a better Christian. And he would speak according to the 10 Commandments. So Prabhupada's preaching was very much appreciated by the Christians at that time. But Prabhupada at the same time realized that Butler, being a very small town, in the hills of Pennsylvania, he wasn't going to make much of a world organization there. So one day he said to Sally and Gopal, "It's time for me to move. I'm going to go now to New York. And first I'm going to spend 2 days in Philadelphia, which is the main city in Pennsylvania." So Sally was very worried about him because she saw he didn't know yet how to live in America. He had no warm clothes, and it was already mid-October. It gets cold by that time, and cold that you won't imagine, the type of cold that you experience in, for instance, Panchagoda. He comes from Buffalo. The cold there, you can't breathe the air. It freezes your lungs. you have to cover up. Everything is covered. You just see the eyes of the people. So Sally knew that Prabhupada would suffer very much in New York. It would be below freezing most of the time. And she knew that he took bath 3 times a day. Now how was he going to take bath in that cold? So Gopal, he took all the change, the coins that he had in the house, and he put them into a sock full of coins. And he taught Prabhupada how to take these coins, and you go to these local bath places. So you can take your bath by putting the coins in, then you're allowed to take a shower. And even when he went to the Pittsburgh to take the bus back to Philadelphia, he showed Prabhupada that you put the coins here, then you can go in the bathroom, you can take a bath, because he knew Prabhupada would want to take a midday bath. So they were very concerned for Prabhupada. They took him both as their father and as their child. So then Prabhupada left. He took that 6-7 hour trip to Philadelphia. In Philadelphia, there are several universities and colleges, and Prabhupada had made an appointment with Dr. Norman Brown at the University of Pennsylvania, which is a top-class university. And there he spent 2 days, and this is 1965, even in 1970, when we joined there in Philadelphia, Prabhupada was still writing to the temple president that you go see Dr. Brown, you bring him some prasadam, you tell him I'm remembering him. And Prabhupada was so personal, and that was another thing that the people noticed in Butler, Pennsylvania. Anyone that he met, he remembered their names. And if he would see them while he was taking his walks, see them in the supermarket, he would remember their names and offer greetings to them. They were very impressed how sharp his mind was. So Prabhupada, in all of his contexts, he took very careful concern that very personally he would develop that relationship with them. So even 5-10 years later, Prabhupada was still asking about Dr. Brown at the University of Pennsylvania. And finally in 1976, when Prabhupada came to Philadelphia, he met with Dr. Brown. So 2 days in Pennsylvania, then Prabhupada went to New York. Prabhupada didn't know anyone in New York. His sponsor was in Pennsylvania. But a friend of his knew a Swami, Dr. Mishra, Dr. Rama, I forget his name now, Ramakrishna Mishra? Ramakrishna Mishra. And in New York City, there were some Mayavadi Swamis. They were called the Uptown Swamis, because New York City is made out of 5 different mahallas. And the center mahalla is called Manhattan. And in Manhattan, you've got uptown Manhattan, where all the rich people live, and you've got downtown Manhattan, where the immigrants and the hippies and the poor people live. So these Swamis, when they came to America, they connected with wealthy widows and different people who had money, and they set up ashrams. So this is where Prabhupada was going to stay when he was in New York City. And Prabhupada's Leela is unlimited, so we'll have to stop here today. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. I'm yours. We can go on forever so far as I'm concerned. Okay, Lower East Side Katha. Okay. So Prabhupada's in New York now. Hare Krishna.